Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. ALLIE Gwyn, the quiet observer, the empathetic healer, the woman everyone underestimated, has been the true mastermind behind Sienna's kidnapping all along, orchestrating every shadowy move with surgical precision while secretly teaming up with Matt in a daring, dangerous, and deeply personal plot to bring Victor Newman to his knees. And it all begins when fragments of the truth start bubbling to the surface in ways no one can ignore anymore, as whispers circulate that Sienna's disappearance was far too clean, too intentional, too perfectly timed to be the work of a random criminal, and when chance follows a trail of evidence that seems to dead-end at a series of burner phones and offshore payments, he has no idea that the digital fingerprints don't belong to a faceless villain, but to someone who has been hiding in plain sight, someone who has sat at family tables, offered comfort, and listened carefully while others talked themselves into believing they were safe, because ALLIE has always listened, always watched, always remembered, and her motivations are rooted in a complicated mix of justice, rage, betrayal, and heartbreak that traces back to Victor's ruthless choices that destroyed lives without consequence, including the quiet erasure of someone ALLIE loved deeply, a loss Victor dismissed as collateral damage in one of his corporate wars. And while Victor prides himself on being 10 steps ahead of everyone, this time he never sees the knife coming. Because it's wrapped in kindness and patience, and Matt, brilliant, morally conflicted, and burned by Victor's manipulations, becomes ALLIE's secret ally not out of greed or power lust, but because he too has been broken by the Newman machine, and together they form an alliance built on mutual pain and a shared goal. Not to kill Victor, not to expose him in a single explosive move, but to dismantle him slowly, methodically, by forcing him to feel the same fear and helplessness he has inflicted on others for decades, and Sienna's kidnapping is the first move in that chess game. Not because Sienna is the ultimate target, but because she is the key, the leverage point that will draw Victor into making mistakes, revealing secrets, and overplaying his hand. And when Sienna awakens in captivity, terrified and confused, the voice that reassures her through the darkness is calm, female, almost gentle, promising that she won't be harmed if she cooperates, and that voice, though disguised, carries an emotional undercurrent that hints this isn't a random crime but a carefully curated experience designed to rattle Victor's empire from the inside out. And as the days pass, Genoa City erupts into chaos, alliances fracture, loyalties are tested, and Victor becomes increasingly volatile, barking orders, threatening enemies, and unknowingly tightening the noose around his own neck. Because every move he makes is anticipated, every counterstrike accounted for, and when Nikki senses that something feels off, that Victor isn't being challenged in the usual way, her instincts scream that the enemy knows him too well, and she's right, because ALLIE has studied Victor through the stories of Jack, the scars of Kyle, the warnings of Diane, and the silence of those who never lived to tell their version. And meanwhile Matt plays his part flawlessly, leaking just enough false information to keep Victor chasing ghosts, arranging clandestine meetings, rerouting funds, and even planting evidence that points toward rival power players, causing Victor to ignite wars on multiple fronts, burning bridges and alienating allies, until the walls of his empire begin to crack under the pressure. And the most shocking moment comes when Chance finally confronts ALLIE with a single, damning question, expecting denial, tears, or outrage, but instead receiving a calm, steady gaze and a quiet confession that chills him to the bone. Because ALLIE doesn't gloat, doesn't brag, she simply explains that some monsters aren't stopped by laws or morals, only by consequence. And when the truth comes out to Jack, Kyle, and Summer, the fallout is nuclear, as they struggle to reconcile the woman they love with the architect of a crime that could send her to prison forever. Yet even in their fury and heartbreak, they can't fully deny that Victor has escaped justice too many times, and this moral grayness tears families apart, as arguments explode over whether ALLIE is a villain or a vigilante. And Victor, finally sensing the trap closing, confronts Matt in a private showdown that crackles with decades of power imbalance, only for Matt to reveal that the game was never about money or control but about accountability. And when Victor demands to know who else is involved, the door opens and ALLIE steps in, the mask fully off now, delivering a speech that will echo through Genoa City for years, laying out every crime, every cover-up, every life shattered by Victor Newman's ambition, and for the first time, Victor is speechless, not because he's afraid of prison, but because he realizes he's been outplayed by someone he never considered a threat, and as Sienna is safely recovered and the authorities close in, the question isn't whether Victor will survive the storm, but what it will cost him, because reputations are ruined, secrets are public, and the myth of Victor Newman as the untouchable king is forever broken, while Allie faces her own reckoning, choosing to turn herself in not as an act of defeat but as the final move in her plan, forcing Victor to watch as she accepts consequences he never has, and in that moment, the true defeat is clear, because Victor may still have his wealth, his power, and his name, but he has lost the one thing he valued most, control, and as Genoa City reels from the aftermath, one truth remains undeniable. Allie Gwyn changed the game forever, proving that the most dangerous enemy isn't the loudest or the strongest, but the one who waits, plans, and strikes with purpose, leaving behind a legacy that will haunt the young and the restless long after the shock fades. Allie's plan had been meticulously crafted over months, every detail mapped out with a precision that would make even the most seasoned criminals envious. From the moment she first conceived the idea of taking Sienna hostage, she knew it would not only destabilize Victor but also provide her and Matt the perfect opportunity to seize control of the power dynamics in Genoa City. It wasn't about revenge alone, it was about sending a clear, unignorable message to the man who thought he could manipulate everyone around him. Victor Newman, for all his wealth and influence, had underestimated Allie's cunning, her capacity to play the long game, and her unwavering determination. Allie had known that taking Sienna would trigger a domino effect. Sienna, who had always been perceived as fragile and dependent, was deeply loved by Matt and surprisingly connected to many of the city's power players. By leveraging Sienna's vulnerability, Allie was not just threatening an innocent life, she was striking at the very heart of Victor's empire, knowing full well that Victor's protective instincts would make him reckless. Every call to Sienna's friends, every lead left dangling, was a calculated move designed to throw Victor off balance, to make him question his allies, and to create a climate of fear and uncertainty. Matt, meanwhile, had initially been skeptical when Allie approached him. He had heard rumors, whispers of her abilities to manipulate and strategize, but nothing could have prepared him for the cold, meticulous logic she displayed. She didn't just ask for his help, she showed him a vision of the future, one in which Victor Newman could be challenged in ways he never expected. Allie had evidence, carefully documented, of Victor's misdeeds and vulnerabilities, things that even a man as powerful as Victor would find difficult to deny. And she presented Matt with a simple, irresistible choice: continue playing by Victor's rules, or take the opportunity to finally upend them and reclaim some measure of justice for those Victor had wronged. The moment they had first met in the dimly lit back room of Crimson Lights, the air had been thick with tension. Matt's natural skepticism clashed with Allie's resolute calm, but there was an undeniable chemistry in their partnership. It wasn't romantic, at least not in the traditional sense, but it was electric, a shared understanding that they were on the same side of a dangerous game. They spoke in whispers, plotting moves several steps ahead of anyone else, anticipating Victor's every reaction, predicting the ways he might manipulate the scenario to his advantage. Allie had orchestrated Sienna's abduction with precision. The location had been chosen carefully, a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town, surrounded by abandoned factories and derelict buildings that provided both anonymity and control. Security cameras were disabled, and every potential witness had been carefully considered and neutralized, some through persuasion, some through intimidation. Every detail had been accounted for: food, water, escape routes, contingency plans in case of discovery, and even the psychological aspect, ensuring Sienna would remain calm enough to avoid drawing immediate attention but scared enough to comply with instructions. When Sienna had been taken, the panic that erupted in Genoa City was instantaneous. Matt had received the first anonymous call, carefully crafted to both warn and manipulate him. Allie's voice, disguised and disguised again, had spoken with cold clarity, outlining the terms without giving away her identity. It was both a warning and a challenge. If you want to see her alive, you'll have to play by my rules. Matt had recognized the sophistication immediately. Whoever had planned this was not acting out of impulsive anger. This was strategy. This was a game, and he had been summoned to play. Victor's reaction had been predictable, almost theatrical in its intensity. Rage, fear, and disbelief warred across his face when the news first reached him. The idea that someone could outmaneuver him in his own city, manipulate events, and hold someone he cared about hostage was an affront he could scarcely tolerate. He unleashed his usual arsenal: threats, coercion, and the deployment of his most trusted operatives. But Allie's planning had anticipated every move. She had studied Victor for months, understanding his weaknesses, his predictable tendencies, and his psychological triggers. Every step Victor took was met with a countermeasure, every attempt at intimidation neutralized or turned to Allie's advantage. Meanwhile, Matt found himself walking a dangerous line. He wanted desperately to save Sienna, but he also recognized the potential in Allie's plan. Her goal was not merely to punish Victor, but to shift the balance of power in the city, and Matt could see how he could play a pivotal role in this shift. He began working behind the scenes, gathering intelligence, subtly redirecting Victor's forces, and feeding Allie information that could be leveraged to ensure the plan's success. Every message they exchanged, every secret signal, felt like a delicate dance over a pit of snakes. One misstep could cost Sienna her life and ruin them all. As the days stretched into nights filled with tension, Sienna herself began to understand the precariousness of her situation. She wasn't just a pawn. She was a person with insight, intelligence, and the ability to manipulate circumstances in subtle ways. Allie had underestimated her resilience, her capacity to maintain calm, and assess the situation critically. The interactions between captor and captive became a psychological battlefield, with Allie constantly testing boundaries, gauging Sienna's reactions, and adjusting tactics. Sienna, in turn, started to plant seeds of doubt, tiny cracks in Allie's meticulous plans, using logic, empathy, and persuasion to try to influence outcomes without alerting her captor to the full extent of her awareness. Victor's attempts to uncover Sienna's location became increasingly desperate. He called in favors, employed clandestine surveillance, and even attempted to manipulate allies into revealing information. But Allie and Matt were always one step ahead. Every phone call was traced and redirected, every clue carefully planted to mislead, every ally turned into an unwitting actor in a game they barely understood. The tension in Genoa City reached fever pitch, with everyone from close family members to casual acquaintances on edge, wondering who could be trusted and what lengths the kidnappers would go to. In the shadows of this high-stakes drama, alliances began to shift. Characters who had previously been loyal to Victor started questioning his judgment, noticing cracks in the armor of his dominance. Rumors spread like wildfire, uncertainty fueled speculation, and fear of being on the wrong side of the unfolding chaos led some of Victor's allies to reconsider their positions. Meanwhile, Allie and Matt's partnership grew stronger, built on shared purpose and a growing mutual respect. They moved with silent coordination, understanding each other's methods, anticipating reactions, and preparing contingencies for contingencies. One of the most pivotal moments came when Matt discovered a potential flaw in Allie's plan, an unexpected patrol near the warehouse that threatened to expose them. For a brief moment, panic flared, but Allie's calm and analytical mind turned the situation into an advantage. She devised a diversion, using misinformation to lure the patrol away and creating an illusion of abandonment that allowed them to maintain control. Matt marveled at her ability to think several steps ahead, to anticipate complications, and to turn potential disaster into a strategic opportunity. As the days passed, Sienna's interactions with Allie became increasingly complex. Allie attempted to assert dominance, to maintain psychological control, but Sienna's subtle defiance, her keen observation, and her ability to anticipate Allie's moves created a tense equilibrium. It was a chess match in real life, with every word, every gesture, every decision carrying weighty consequences. And in this delicate balance, Matt and Allie coordinated their next moves, knowing that one mistake could unravel everything. Finally, the culmination of their efforts came to a head. The plan was set to either succeed spectacularly or fail catastrophically. Allie and Matt orchestrated a situation where Victor would be forced into direct confrontation, using a combination of psychological manipulation, strategic threats, and carefully placed evidence to corner him. The tension was unbearable, with every actor in Genoa City caught in the gravity of the unfolding drama. And as the moment of reckoning arrived, secrets were revealed, alliances shattered, and the true extent of Allie's cunning became apparent to everyone involved. In the end, Sienna was rescued, but not without cost. Victor's authority had been shaken, his enemies emboldened, and the landscape of power in Genoa City had been irrevocably altered. Allie emerged as a master strategist, having demonstrated the power of intellect, patience, and meticulous planning. Matt, transformed by the experience, recognized the importance of alliances, trust, and calculated risk in a world dominated by wealth and influence. And Sienna, forever changed by her ordeal, gained a newfound understanding of resilience, agency, and the complex moral landscape of those around her. The city would never be the same, and the reverberations of Allie's plan would echo for months, if not years. Victor, once untouchable, now understood the fragility of even the most carefully constructed empire. Allie, having achieved her objective, vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of awe, fear, and grudging respect. And Matt, having walked the tightrope between morality and ambition, emerged as a figure who had glimpsed the raw mechanics of power, ready to navigate a city forever changed by one woman's audacious plan and the partnership that had defied expectation. Every conversation, every secret, every betrayal, and every revelation became part of the ongoing narrative of the young and the restless, where ambition and cunning collided in a spectacular display of strategy, courage, and the relentless pursuit of power. Allie's kidnapping scheme, executed with brilliance and precision, became legendary, a story whispered in offices, corridors, and homes across Genoa City, a reminder that even the most powerful could be outsmarted, and that sometimes the smallest move on a chessboard could change the course of an empire. As the days wore on, the tension in Genoa City was palpable, a quiet storm gathering strength under the surface of everyday life. People went about their routines with an undercurrent of fear, rumors of Sienna's disappearance spreading like wildfire and leaving a trail of uncertainty. Every phone call, every text, every seemingly innocuous conversation was tinged with the possibility of revelation. Allie and Matt, operating in a realm of meticulous planning, continued their careful orchestration, fully aware that the slightest misstep could unravel everything. Yet, in the midst of their calculated maneuvers, a subtle transformation was occurring in both of them, a shift in the way they perceived the stakes and each other. Allie had always approached her schemes with a clinical precision, a mind tuned to detail and strategy, but now she found herself navigating new territory, the emotional complexity of her captor-captive dynamic. Sienna was no ordinary hostage. She was intelligent, intuitive, and resourceful, traits that complicated the plan in ways Allie hadn't anticipated. Every interaction with Sienna became a delicate negotiation, a psychological duel in which words were weapons and gestures carried hidden meanings. Sienna, for her part, was acutely aware of her position. She had learned quickly that any outward display of fear could be exploited, and so she adopted a mask of calm resilience, observing Allie, calculating, and waiting for an opening. Meanwhile, Matt found himself caught between conflicting obligations. His loyalty to Sienna was undeniable, yet he recognized the strategic genius in Allie's plan. The more he collaborated with her, the more he realized the scope of Victor's vulnerabilities, the subtle cracks in the facade of power that he had always assumed were unassailable. Matt's own moral compass, however, was constantly tested. He had always prided himself on integrity, on doing what was right, but this situation demanded flexibility, the kind of bending of rules he had previously resisted. With every decision he made in coordination with Allie, he felt both the exhilaration of strategic victory and the weight of ethical compromise. Victor, for his part, was operating on instinct and fury. The news of Sienna's abduction had struck him like a lightning bolt, igniting a mix of paternal concern, pride, and unbridled rage. He mobilized his network of contacts, deploying private investigators, leveraging